utilization of the site. We just received, the city, not DCP, but we just received 11 proposals in response to the RFP for the planning process for the property. Also, you know that we're working on our comprehensive development plan, which is a big deal for us because this is a 20-year plan for the city's growth and development. And at the same time, we're working on our zoning ordinance so that we will have the rules in place to implement our plan. The CDP, the Comprehensive Development Plan, is the plan, and the zoning ordinance is the law that implements the plan. We're also working on our tree protection ordinance that we're trying to get wrapped up here this summer. The facilitator is working with the working committee of 24 people that represent a lot of different groups that have interest in the tree protection ordinance. And we'll have the report from the facilitator in July, and then we can write the changes to the ordinance and hopefully have it adopted by the end of this year. So looking ahead to fiscal year 2025, we will continue to work on the zoning ordinance and the CDP. We need to wrap those up. We have the Neighborhood Planning Unit 50th anniversary celebration. And we're going to have a repeat of the Affordable Housing Week, which is just great because we received so much positive feedback that we want to do it again and help everyone who wasn't able to attend this last time. I'm going to hand off to Tiffany here because she works with these numbers every single day, and she can speak more in depth on it than I can.
So here you will see our position count by fund. On the top chart is where we stood as of the January 22nd snapshot taken by finance. And in FY24, we were averaging about 30% vacancy rate. However, you'll see on the bottom chart is where we currently stand. And as you can see, we have brought down our vacancy rate to around 26%. 26% is still relatively high. However, in contrast, in FY23, our average vacancy rate was about 35%. So we are certainly trending in the right direction. And with the continuation of our recruitment and retention plan, we certainly anticipate reducing this number even further. Next here, you will see a snapshot of our budget. So we did receive an increase of about 12.21%, and this is primarily in the area of personnel. On the next slide, here's a breakout of that budget. As I stated, we did receive an increase in the area of personnel. So we do believe we are sufficiently funded in that area, as this proposed budget does take into account, of course, our current head count, but projected staffing levels as well, in addition to our proposed actions in the personnel paper. You do see a small reduction in purchase contract. We are reduced about $118,000 there. And that's simply due to just being able to identify other funding sources for some of our initiatives. Next, you will see in the area of supplies, we did have a small reduction there of about $4,100. The interfund interdepartmental account, so there is another small reduction there of $12,000. So we do have newer vehicles that we procured this year. So with those newer vehicles, we do anticipate having a reduction in repairs and maintenance. So we do expect a reduction in costs there. Our other costs, our primary drivers in that category are essentially credit card charges and refunds.
We're going to hit the pause button for a second. They actually have been presenting, explaining. Give us a second. They're going to take this down.
Sure. Slide 7. So again, the other cost category, there was a reduction there as well of about 24,000. So again, our primary drivers in that category are refunds and credit card charges. Due to the improvements in our review and permitting process, we anticipate a reduction in refunds. So that's why we see a reduction in our other cost category. And all in all, that's where we stand. Again, we did receive an increase of about 12.21%, primarily in the area of personnel, as I stated. Thank you.
And we are available for any questions that you may have.
Seeing none? No, I'm kidding.
All right, thank you.
Go ahead, Councilmember Winston, you have the floor.
Thank you, Vice Chair One. I'll just say overall, generally, just happy to really see how you all have made really good strides in the permitting process. I know we had a large backlog last year, Commissioner, when you came on board. Just trying to really get a sense of if the budget personnel numbers put you in a good place for the long term as we continue to see growth and more permits being submitted through the city of Atlanta. Just making sure that you feel like you have the adequate staffing and personnel to be able to keep up with the demand.
We feel like we have adequate staff for the upcoming fiscal year. As you know, we have the contract with Nova Engineering that really helps us out when there are spikes in demand for inspections. They fill in for us. So we are all set for the upcoming fiscal year. Of course, at the end of next year, we'll have to look at it again.
Okay. And, you got a lot of big initiatives coming up. You got the tree protection ordinance. We're looking at short-term rental. So, it just seems like, your department, even with CDP, there's a lot going on in the next fiscal year, and just want to make sure that you've got the personnel, to be able to handle that. I think it's important. And obviously there's a significant increase, maybe not significant to you, but there is an increase in the budget to be able to handle that. Contracted services, you're showing that those should go down this fiscal year. Can you talk a little bit more about where you see the decline in the need for contracted services?
So in that category, again, we do see a reduction for next year, but we were able to identify alternate funding sources, primarily in our office of buildings. We have a one-time implementation for our new permitting software that we were able to fund through our committed fund balance. So.
Okay. All right, I yield. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Winston. I'm going to jump in. I've got a couple of questions. The first one I'll start with is about the payroll or the salaries line. So it's going up by 2.1 million. I do see that your headcount is going up somewhat, but this may be, let me start with finance first. I'm assuming that much like the other presentations we've seen, part of the increase is due to FY24 having some partial year vacant type allocation. That I'm assuming this is all fully staffed for FY25. So we're seeing at least a big jump.
You're correct. Okay.
All right.
Councilmember Juan.
So that helps explain that. But I guess my next question, though, is that on page 5, when you talk about your head count, I guess I'm a little confused here, because to me, the unfunded positions signal that while we've created the position, they were not funded because we didn't think we needed them. I'm just kind of generalizing here. So if that's the case, then your vacancy rate really is either 3.7 divided by 264 or 250, 265 or 250. That, am I reading that correctly? I mean, in terms of interpreting how y'all are looking at unfunded vacant positions?
So for us, the unfunded positions, they're unfunded essentially because at the time of the snapshot, they were vacant. However, we do have commitment from finance that as the year progresses, if we do find that these are mission critical positions that we need to fill at that time, although they're unfunded, finance will work with us and take it on a case by case basis to get those figures. Is that?
Yeah, it answers my question.
Snapshot is taken in January, and at that moment in time, the positions weren't filled.
And they were not funded. So now, I mean, finance, y'all know I've been a big kind of talk about funded vacant positions because I like stalled money sitting in a position that is filled. Now I'm wondering if the pendulum has swung the other direction where all of a sudden we have a lot of unfunded positions that, much so as Ms. Cole said, that if they need it in mid-year, we'll fund it. So are we actually now understating our salary if all departments are going in with the expectation of mid-year, I find I've got a critical position, I can flip from unfunded to funded, somehow we'll find the money for it.
So I'll start answering that question. But, just from a practical standpoint, you make some assumptions within salaries. Part of it is attrition. But as we naturally go through month by month and verify, analyze actual versus budget, if there is, because they have been very proactive about hiring, having more success in the hiring, might be necessary. But it's one of those things that go through the process. And meeting with them, talk about it. There may be savings elsewhere. Where it's not
Okay, so I think you answered my next question. Is that so? Mid-year, I find I've got 5 positions I need that are unfunded. I need to fund them now. I can do it one of 2 ways. I've got excess funds or surplus in another line item. I can apply it there, or if I need additional funds, then I can ask for a budget amendment.
we'll look at IRT,
Yeah.
the fund, general.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong, I'd rather be on this side of the fence in terms of that we don't fund positions and then we find we need them, we make adjustments, then versus we fund all these positions and we don't use them. We've got all the money tied up. But where that's leading me to is, though, back to Councilmember Winston's question, is appropriate staff level. And so it just is weird to me that we've got 25%, 20, maybe 23% if you do the math, vacancy that is unfunded. You say you have enough staff to do the work, so why do we have these sitting out there? I guess I can't reconcile that in my head.
So the way I like to think about it is when the snapshot is taken of the personnel, it tells us what positions are open. And they use this information from the snapshot to help us create the budget for the next year. We've had some difficulty with filling the inspectors' positions because they're very specialized. And particularly before the pay and classification study was done, we weren't very competitive in
Right.
all of our positions. So we feel that going forward, we will be more competitive as the results of the pay and class study are implemented. And also because we have the NOVA contract, we can handle any fluctuations that we need to have. This year, we had some positions that we need to have funded for additional affordable housing positions. You may remember we created the affordable housing work stream, and that added positions to the Office of Buildings and the Office of Zoning and Development. And that funding came specifically from affordable housing funds to help us with that. So as our needs change, if our needs change, we're confident that the mayor's office will work with us to help us find the funding that we might need. Right now, looking at this, we're pretty happy with what we have here. We feel like we can do the job with what we've got right here.
Okay. I just want to understand this chart right here on page 5. The top one is the snapshot, And then the bottom one is what you're projecting out for FY25, correct?
This is actually today and, well, July 1st.
Current,
That's what we're
okay.
going to have is current.
Okay. All right, sorry, I'm getting thrown by the title here because this is current. We're still in FY24. So FY25, how does that look in terms of the positions that you're asking for, the vacant funded, which means we still have to go there. You're adding positions and we have to go hire them, and then the ones that are unfunded. That actually would look like a very different table, correct?
Well, it's close. We're almost to the end of the fiscal year, so July 1 is not going to look much different, but we do have a lot of vacancies for inspectors. We have 92 vacancies for inspectors, so we're working on that.
Okay. I guess I'm going to have to dive into this. I am going somewhere with this. So just 30 minutes ago, you and I are talking about potential needs and questions and concerns. Much like Councilmember Winston said, a year ago today, we were talking about permits and reviewers, and that logjam has been broken. But what still lingers, I think what we hear about more, what I hear about more is code enforcement and inspections. And so I'd like to hear a little bit more about the strategy there, because I guess if I'm seeing here that we've only got 3.7 funded vacant positions, even if all of those were for code enforcement inspectors, it doesn't feel like it's enough to me, given the level of inquiries that we're getting. And while I understand that maybe that, there's capacity to use a contract service to absorb those fluctuations, I don't know that there is. I also think, I'm not sure that that's the right strategy for that particular function. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that concern.
Found since I got here almost 2 years ago is that my emails are a bellwether of things to come. When I arrived, I used to get the "Where's my permit?" emails, a few each day, and now I get 1 or 2 a week. You're right, we have cleared the logjam. The Office of Buildings has just been great. The hard work they've done, I'm really impressed. My emails now, there are maybe 3 or 4 a week about code enforcement. The primary issues are things like building without permits, illegal tree cutting, party houses, illegal businesses. It's kind of all over the place. And I'm sure you know that code enforcement is partly done by the Department of City Planning and partly by APD.
Sure. Yep.
And there is some confusion about who does what and who can do what. My employees work a 8 to 5 schedule. We do have code enforcement 7 days a week. We have a weekend phone number that you can call. But we can't go out at 3 o'clock in the morning and take care of things like DoorDash drivers at ghost kitchens.
Sure, yeah.
Yes. So that said, DCOO ADA is pulling together a group of all the different departments that touch code enforcement so that we can come at this issue the way we did with the permitting process improvements. We need to all get together and define what exactly the problems are and work out how to best address them. And I imagine this will be quite a process, just like we did with permitting. So I think that it won't just be our staff, it will be APD. It may be people from the Parks Department or Public Works or what have you. Yeah, it could be a lot of different departments. So we're going to work together on this. Of course, we will keep you apprised of it every step of the way. Right now, we're trying just to get everybody in the room. But what I have been doing is keeping track of who sends me the emails so that I have them to put together a focus group to help us define the problems and help us better solve them. So there's a lot to be done, and we're aware of this, and we can shift around staffing as needed because the employees who would be assigned to this effort would primarily be in the Office of Buildings, but also in the Office of the Commissioner, our business process people who make sure that everything happens smoothly. They'll be involved in this as well.
It's good to know that. I think, what strikes me though is that takes time. I mean, because you got to get, like you said, you got to get people in the room, you got to start, landscape scanning and then come up with a solution to figure out implementation. So all the while, the clock is ticking. And unlike building permits and review, where essentially that, unfortunately, all it does is draw out the construction timeline for an applicant. The problem with this, though, is that the infractions or potential infractions have already occurred or are occurring, and the longer the delay in terms of addressing it, the harder the remedies potentially could become. I mean, because essentially sometimes you may ultimately be asking for someone to unconstruct, tear down something they've already built. So I just impress upon you that time, in this instance, time is of the essence, a little more so than building permit logjam. I think we feel a lot more heat around it. So I would encourage you in terms of your staffing needs that it's a two-step process. There is a very short term, what do I got to do to ramp up to address the build up so that it doesn't become this critical logjam, and then all the while figure out what the longer term multi-departmental solution is. And I'm leaning in as we do during these processes because it's what we're hearing the most of and what we're trying to respond to. And this is the best time for us to speak to and understand what the strategy is. So I appreciate hearing that, but just leave that thought with you that I think it has a little bit different sense of urgency on it than perhaps where we were a year ago with the other topic. Okay, so I've asked my staff question. So just to reiterate, tree protection ordinance, July is when we'll see a draft, and then as that gets socialized, the goal is to have that adopted by the end of the calendar year?
In July, we will have the report from the
Report.
facilitator, and then we have to draft the ordinance.
Okay. What, again, just so that we understand, what the timeline to translate the report into an ordinance that then gets digested by everyone on every side of this issue?
Well, staff has been really involved in the working group meetings. There are tree advocates, of course, were involved, the development community, the affordable housing and equity community, and a whole lot of city staff. And so we've kept the conversations at a very high level, a technical basis. And we did this deliberately to make it easier to draft the ordinance.
Okay.
We've had speakers come to the working group meetings to talk to us about what about our ordinance makes it difficult to save more trees? How can we make it easier to save trees? And I think that was very eye-opening for everyone. So we've taken very careful notes. There have been, I know I'm going to remember this wrong, 8 working group meetings, and then 12 caucus group meetings, smaller group meetings to discuss important subtopics within this. So I think that when we get the report, we'll be very well prepared to draft the ordinance, and I would like to have it adopted by the end of this year.
Yeah, I was going to say, just the quicker we turn the digestion time on this, despite the stakeholders that and I appreciate the very thorough and comprehensive approach y'all have taken. I think we're all just anticipating it's going to be a very rigorous discussion, public discussion about this because of the many different stakeholders that will want to weigh in. So just give us as much runway as you.
Yes, sir, we will.
I think all of us would also like to get this done by the end of the year, just so that we can finally resolve. I have one more question, and then I'll see if any of my colleagues have additional questions. This is more for finance, and this is a random question, but So the other personnel costs for all the departments, and they all have the same general property line, the budget based on healthcare costs, including group life and Medicare. I think all over the place. Some departments, it's a big plus amount, other departments, minus amount. It doesn't seem to be like there has kind of a consistent or obvious logic to it. I don't understand why city planning necessarily has it, but I think there's some other departments that are equally big. But is there some consistent explanation that you share that helps shed light on that, so that we kind of know what we're looking at when we see the fluctuation? I mean, is it headcount? Is it the way the department staff composition is? What can you share with me?
So, there are a couple components you've hit on. Of it.
And can you pull your mic closer? Yeah, thanks.
Medical benefits, health benefits, which is a function of headcount.
Yeah.
And where those rate fluctuations might vary. They were great. Not been passed on to employees, but covers, as well as pension fluctuation. Pension as well. And we get actuarial numbers around this time during the year. So right size that every year. It can fluctuate up and down across a number of departments, partly as a function of.
Does it also go into kind of the census that is taken for employees within each department? I mean, or is it just simply on headcount? Again, I feel like I've seen departments that are large have both large increases in this one line and then large decreases. So that to me is what's kind of thrown off as well.
Mohammed Bala, one of the other indications year to year from department to department that might change is the personnel composition in each department. So if a department had a lot of extra help personnel and those extra help had benefits in them, you wouldn't necessarily see a big shift in their benefits line item. If a department onboarded a lot of new employees over the last year, and those new employees were added to the roster, that would be in addition to the benefits calculation. So sometimes you'll see movements from extra help to the personnel line item. There wouldn't be a big shift in additional budgets for benefits. But if the department had onboarded a lot of new hires, then we would have made that adjustment for the benefits.
Yeah, the first place I went to look at is parks, because I know parks ended up flipping a lot of part-time. So I did see how theirs went up. Contrast to that, Public Works, large department, yet theirs went down by. Again, I'm just trying to understand consistency, but another conversation for another day. Other questions or comments from my colleagues? Councilmember Norwood, I want to recognize that she's joined us. Did you have anything? All right, with that, we'll close out your session. We appreciate the presentation and look forward to hopefully moving this forward with the entire budget. So thank you all.
Thank you.
All right, we are a little ahead of schedule. I don't know if grants and community development are here yet. If you are and want to come up, we'll get you started and can get you